It was just another day in global politics until it wasn't. Roughly 24 hours ago, an unexpected yet highly anticipated phone call took place between former U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian leader Vladimir Putin. While the world was no stranger to Trump's admiration for Putin, this call would reveal something neither side had entirely expected. Putin had always been a man of preparation, a strategist who knew how to navigate global affairs like a grandmaster on a chessboard. He understood Trump's personality, his tendencies, his strengths, and most importantly, his weaknesses. This was not just a phone call, this was an opportunity. For 2 months, Putin had observed Trump's behavior. The rhetoric was clear. Trump wanted to end the war in Ukraine, and he wanted to do it fast. There was talk of concessions, whispers of territorial compromises, and subtle suggestions that NATO expansion could be put on hold. To Putin, it was a dream scenario. Trump, on the other hand, had been making promises. He'd claimed repeatedly during his campaign that he would end the Ukraine conflict in 24 hours. The world listened with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, but here he was, face to face, well, voice to voice, with the one man who could make or break that promise. And then the conversation began. Putin, ever the tactician, opened with a firm yet diplomatic tone. He outlined his expectations, throwing out a series of demands that were nothing short of audacious. First, all arms shipments to Ukraine must stop. Second, Ukraine's military must shrink to a level dictated by Russia. And third, NATO membership and security guarantees for Ukraine must be off the table. These were not mere suggestions. These were ultimatums, terms that, if accepted, would place Ukraine at the mercy of Russia's next move. But Trump, despite his characteristic bravado, did not outright reject them. Instead, he tried to maneuver within them. Trump's response was revealing. He did not say no. Instead, he hedged. I can't dictate what the Europeans do, but if we're talking about U.S. weapons, we can discuss it temporarily. Let's put the NATO issue aside for now and focus on the ceasefire. Ukraine and Russia need to find common ground. Putin, listening intently, knew exactly what was happening. He had seen leaders like this before, men who thought they could outplay him, outmaneuver him, negotiate their way into favorable terms. But Russian diplomacy operates on a different principle. Putin wasn't here to negotiate, he was here to dictate. As the conversation unfolded, something shifted. Trump was beginning to realize that Putin was not the man he had envisioned. For years, Trump had admired the Russian leader. He saw in him a reflection of the strongman leadership he himself aspired to. He believed that, like himself, Putin respected power, loyalty, and a good deal when he saw one. But this was different, this was cold, this was ruthless. Putin was not looking for a deal, he was looking for submission. If you want a ceasefire, Putin said, you must first stop sending weapons. If you want peace, Ukraine must disarm. And if you want stability, forget about NATO. Trump hesitated. He wasn't used to being cornered like this. He wasn't used to being on the receiving end of hardball tactics, and for the first time he seemed to grasp the true nature of the war in Ukraine. This wasn't just about a land dispute, this wasn't just about NATO, this was about power, about control, about dominance, and suddenly his entire 24-hour peace plan felt absurdly naive. Later that evening, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called Trump. The conversation was described as fantastic by Trump, his usual hyperbole at play, but underneath the surface something had changed. Trump had met the real Putin. He had witnessed firsthand what Ukraine had been facing for years, not just military aggression but psychological warfare, not just land grabs but calculated diplomatic entrapment. Zelensky, sharp as ever, sensed this shift in Trump. He pushed for continued support, reinforcing the idea that any concession would only embolden Putin. Trump, still grappling with the reality of his earlier conversation, offered no firm promises. Instead, he spoke vaguely about finding a fair solution and keeping all options open. It was clear. Trump had walked into a game he was not ready to play. In the aftermath of the call, analysts from across the world dissected every word, every pause, every implied meaning. The Guardian's analysts even mocked the entire situation, wondering aloud whether the world was supposed to take such proposals seriously. But those who understood Russian diplomacy knew better. The Russians have a unique way of negotiating. Their most powerful weapon isn't military strength, it isn't even economic leverage. It is the power of no. No, we won't negotiate. No, we won't compromise. No, we won't concede. And they can say no for decades. They can wait, they can bide their time, and that patience is what makes them formidable. Trump had never encountered this before. For all his bluster, for all his deal-making prowess, he had never faced an adversary who didn't want to make a deal. As the dust settled, Trump was left with a choice. Would he continue pushing for a ceasefire, knowing that Putin saw it as a tactical opportunity rather than a real path to peace? Would he reverse his stance and reinforce military aid, realizing that any sign of weakness would only invite further aggression? Or would he double down on his belief that he could somehow charm Putin into submission? The answer was unclear, but one thing was certain. Donald Trump, for all his confidence, had just met the real Vladimir Putin, and nothing would ever be the same again. In politics, as in war, power is not merely about strength. It is about perception, about endurance, about the ability to dictate the terms of engagement. Trump, once convinced that he could end the war in a day, had just received a masterclass in why wars do not end so easily. Putin had played his hand masterfully, reminding the world and Trump himself that in the grand chessboard of global strategy, not everyone is playing the same game. What do you think? Will Trump's approach work, or is he being outplayed? Comment below and let's discuss. And if you enjoy deep dives like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss our next analysis.